I have not learned since the last talk to how to maneuver a mic stand. Really not kidding. Okay. I wanted to mention something really quick before we move on to Meagan, who's amazing. I like hearing people cheer for people. So, because a lot of these people are nervous and they haven't done this before. So when you cheer, do it. And if they try to sell you stuff, feel free to boo or throw shit at them. Okay, so our next speaker is Meagan Cain. Fun facts about Meagan. One of the things I asked them is if they went to a diner, what would they order? She said, I would go find Indian curry and screw the diner. Her first concert was Rob Zombie. And she likes to quote Pulp Fiction. And I'm so excited for you guys to see this talk because it is mind-blowing. Get out tissues. Okay, so that being said, please give a big hand to Meagan. You know how to work the mic stand. Good luck. Oh, I'm gonna hold it.
All great changes begin with chaos. For me, it literally took the world falling down around me, bricks and all, to see the changes that I had been searching for. Let me back up. I first truly saw violence in the summer of 2014, when I first traveled to Nepal to teach basic public health to sexually exploited women and children in Kathmandu. What I found among these women were not only stories of unimaginable cruelty and violence, but also glimmers of hope and resilience. From girls who had been gang raped to women who were sold into prostitution by their own husbands, all of my participants had experienced inhumanity at its worst, yet refused to give up. It defied everything, absolutely everything I thought Nepal would be like. While most of the world remained oblivious to the struggles of Nepali women and children, Nepal suddenly became a visible spot on the map when a 7.8 earthquake struck just outside of Kathmandu. Over 8,000 people were killed, over 16,000 were injured, and nearly 3 million were displaced. While the media focused on the collapsing temples and buried bodies of Kathmandu, a much more hidden disaster was unfolding. During an immediately following disaster, women are one of the most disproportionately affected and vulnerable populations. It's typical to see increases in gender violence, such as human trafficking, rape, and domestic abuse, while the unique needs of women go largely ignored. Nepal was no exception. Given my previous experience and the knowledge that many of the issues I had previously explored were now being exacerbated, I knew that my current women's health project in the epicenter of the quake zone in a trafficking hotspot was going to be difficult. However, what I didn't know was that the very women and girls society had written off as collateral damage, who I myself had called victims, were actually the very best examples of disaster relief. Now, it would be impossible for me to share with you all of the amazing efforts I witnessed while living in Nepal for 3.5 months following the worst disaster in its history. But what I can tell you is that all of the relief efforts I engaged with were led by women and girls. Sumitra, who was first banished from her village when she was 12 years old for speaking out against her rapist, orchestrated the only supply distribution to that very village. Maya, who was doused in lighter fluid and lit on fire by her husband, braved landslides to deliver emergency relief to families trapped in Solakhumbu, Everest. And the girls of the Kumari, one of the most marginalized and trafficked populations in all of Nepal, put rebuilding their own lives on hold to erect a greenhouse for the village. So how is it that the most vulnerable population, who's only ever mentioned in disaster literature merely to fill the role of victim, actually the most critical agent of change for long-term recovery? All changes begin with chaos. Our fear of chaos comes from our need for order and predictability. However, in a world that is expected to be unfair, expected to be cruel, expected to be violent, maybe chaos is just what we need. Much like shifting our definition of women to victims, to leaders, we must also shift our paradigms of short-term relief to long-term recovery. Involving women as leaders following disaster is not only critical for rebuilding, it's also an amazing opportunity to begin to break down and redefine traditional gender lines. It shouldn't take an earthquake for the world to see there is something very terrible happening in Nepal. It shouldn't take rising prison incarceration rates to realize there's something wrong with our own system. It shouldn't take a school shooting to begin discussing violence. But it does. Whatever chaos is happening in the world or even in your own lives, there's a need to not just rebuild, but to build better. Now is the time to include those who are most vulnerable and also most silent in leadership. Now is the time to ask women and girls what they need to thrive and how they can play a role in rebuilding. Now is the time, in the chaos of today and the uncertainty of tomorrow, to rise.